Hi, I'm Teresa Lovers, Indiana's Commissioner for Higher Education. Welcome to FAFSA Friday, part of Learn More Indiana's annual Cash for College campaign. Keeping college affordable for Hoosier families is a top priority for us at the Commission, and we're working to make sure every Indiana student has the opportunity to complete education beyond high school. College continues to be one of the best investments you can make for your future. And when it comes to paying for college, filing the free application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA, is the smartest move you can make. Filing the FAFSA by March 10th makes you eligible for grants and scholarships from the state of Indiana, from most colleges, and from the federal government. And if you do have to borrow money for college, filing the FAFSA ensures that you have access to federal student loans with the most favorable repayment options. You're in the right place to get the best information on filing the FAFSA. Our experts will guide you every step of the way so you know what you need to do to complete your FAFSA correctly and on time. We hope you enjoy our FAFSA Friday presentation, and best of luck as you succeed in school and complete college.
Welcome to FAFSA Friday 2014, streaming live from Ball State University. I'm Amber Audrain, and I'm your host from Learn More Indiana. The free application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA, is a crucial step in paying for college. To help you through this process, we have two experts with us tonight, Bill Wozniak from ISM College Planning and Heidi Carl from Wabash College. In addition, we will be taking questions from students live during the event. To help us with this, we have Synovia Garrett from the Indiana Student Financial Aid Office and Doug Lintner from Learn More Indiana. Don't forget to submit your questions throughout the presentation. You can submit them by email at fafsa@learnmore.org, Twitter with hashtag FAFSA Friday, Facebook/LearnMoreIn, or you can give us a call at 1-800-992-2076. Don't worry, you will have access to that information throughout the presentation. Now I'm going to turn this over to Bill and Heidi to help walk you through the FAFSA.
Thank you, Amber. So Heidi, we're all ready to go talk some FAFSA.
Absolutely. Let's do it, Bill.
So first off, let's talk about a very important deadline. 21st Century Scholars, a very important program here in Indiana, and of course, the March 10 deadline is critical for all those 21st Century Scholars, students, and families.
It is very important that students go out and complete their affirmation by that March 10th deadline. And they can do that by going to scholars.in.gov. So that's scholars.in.gov.
Now, another great Indiana resource is eStudent. This is a resource, a website, a page where families can go to find out information about Indiana-specific items regarding the FAFSA, regarding financial aid, and this is a resource that we want families to really know about.
It's good for families to go out there and take a look at this website. They can check to make sure that the state received their FAFSA information, as well as they'll be able to see if there were any type of errors with their FAFSA report. The state does a great job of letting them know what those edits are and how they need to go about fixing them. And then most importantly, since in Indiana our state grants are quite generous, this is where students will be able to go out and see their actual awards once an award has been created for them from the state. So eStudent, you get there at the in.gov/SFA website.
And if a family files the FAFSA and went immediately to the website, there is a little bit of a time waiting where families would have to wait maybe 3 or 4 days to go back out to find their information there. So if they go immediately after filing the FAFSA, don't get worried that your information isn't there right away.
Absolutely. We'll talk at the end of the program a little bit more about the student aid report that students get after their FAFSA has been completed and processed. And when you know that you get your student aid report, that's when you should be able to go out to the eStudent website and start looking at your information online.
So before we get into the FAFSA itself and some of the questions and things that people have about the FAFSA, let's talk about the application process itself. people want to fill out the FAFSA. So what are the steps here about the application process regarding the FAFSA?
One of the important steps for the FAFSA document is to know the deadline. And we've already mentioned that the state of Indiana deadline is March 10th, but your college or university that you're applying to may have an earlier deadline that you need to comply with. So it's important to know the application deadline and to comply with whichever deadline is earlier, either March 10th or a deadline that the college or university has given to you, and get that application in and submitted on time.
Throughout the course of the event here on FAFSA Friday, we're going to have some questions coming from students. And let's go to our first question from a student right here.
Hi, I'm Kyle Mannion. I'm a senior at Cloverdale High School, and I have a question. The school I'm applying to has a different deadline. Do I still have to have the FAFSA filled out by March 10th?
I love the enthusiasm there.
He's very excited to be asking us a question, definitely. Well, as I mentioned, you want to know what your school's deadline is, and if it's later than March 10th, you still want to use the March 10th Indiana State deadline. If it's before March 10th, then you'll want to comply with that deadline specific to the college or university that you're looking at.
Very good. Now let's talk about one of the very early steps, or even before you start the FAFSA, the PIN registration. The PIN number is like a signature. The PIN can be very helpful to finalizing the FAFSA, and it gets requested a couple times. Let's talk about the PIN number in regards to the FAFSA.
Basically, each student who is completing the FAFSA form and one parent, if the student needs to put parents' data on the FAFSA, need to get a PIN number. And you can do that at the web address that's listed on the screen, pin.ed.gov. You go out there and you want to get a PIN number for both the student and one parent.
And right before we begin the FAFSA itself, we're going to go page by page through the FAFSA. We also have a question from a student, I believe, that ties into this topic we were just talking about. So let's go to our next student question.
Hi, my name's Lauren Hurt, and I'm a senior at Minerva High School, and I have a question. If I lost my PIN number, what should I do?
Great question, and this comes up all the time, and there's a very easy and very important answer to this one.
Absolutely. Well, the first tip I would give to families is that they do want to try to get that PIN number written down. You will use that every year as you complete your FAFSA form. So when you go out to create one, make sure you write it down and hang on to it. But inevitably, sometimes you will lose that PIN number, and you can do one of two things. Either go ahead and complete your FAFSA document online, and when you get to the point where you're going to sign the document, you can retrieve it there, or you can go back out to that PIN website and say that you've lost your PIN number and you need to retrieve a new one, and they will send you a duplicate PIN so that you can use the new PIN to be able to sign the FAFSA document.
Great questions so far coming from the video from the students. We will also get some questions from social media, and our friends on the other side of the room here will have those for us as we go along. But how about we dive into the FAFSA itself?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
No better place to start than right at FAFSA.gov. The location, and this may sound like a trivial thing, but it's not, the location itself for filing the FAFSA.
That is www.fafsa.gov. Unfortunately, sometimes there are sites out there that kind of mirror or mask the FAFSA site, but this is the official federal government FAFSA website. So www.fafsa.gov.
So once you get to FAFSA.gov, the very first page, and one thing that families are going to see over the first couple pages that we show here, the first couple screenshots that we show, are some of the basic first steps are very straightforward, not difficult. Take a moment, get them correct, and the first screen we're going to show, the login screen, is definitely one of those.
This is the very beginning where a student's going to put his or her name and their basic social security number and date of birth. A tip that we offer for you there is to actually get out your social security card and make sure that you're entering your name exactly as it appears on the card, and the social security number, you put in all of the correct digits. Unfortunately, you'll see later in the program this is a common mistake. And so if you aren't positive exactly how the student's name or the parent's name is on their social security card, get that out and make sure you type that in there absolutely correct.
So the family does that, they click next, And then the next question that they're going to get is about starting a new FAFSA or FAFSA renewal. Families can benefit from knowing the fact that you have students that are in school right now, taking classes in January or this semester right now, so they may be going in and doing some things. But then there's also families that are going to begin college for the first time come August and September. So you have a couple options here, but we want to get you on the right option on this next screen.
If it is your very first time filling out a FAFSA, you'll want to use the Start New FAFSA option. But if, as Bill said, you're a returning student, an upper class student who's completing your FAFSA again for a second or third or fourth year, you can use the FAFSA renewal and it will pre-populate some of those fields for you like name and address and birth date. Or if you use the great tool that's online, the FAFSA Forecaster tool, maybe as a high school sophomore or junior, you can go ahead and use the Use Renewal or File Renewal option, and it will pull in your FAFSA Forecaster information for you and pre-populate some of that demographic information as well.
So at this point, the family clicks on the proper choice. Quite often it is Start a New FAFSA, but whichever is correct. The button gets clicked and we go to the next page, and about as straightforward as you get, it's just the password.
Right, and this option is great if you're going to sit down and do a little bit of it at a time and you want to be able to come back to it at a later date. That password can be anything that you want it to be, but we do also recommend you write that down just like you wrote down your PIN number so that you know what that password is if you need to go back in there and make corrections or put in further data.
And we'd like to remind everyone that we do have a Twitter hashtag for the event, and that is FAFSA Friday, hashtag FAFSA Friday. And so if anybody wants to communicate with us across that social media platform, they can hit hashtag FAFSA Friday, send us a message that way. But there's also other ways as well. Of course, the facebook.com/learnmorein that Amber was telling us about at the beginning, the phone number on the screen as well, and email fafsa@learnmore.org. So plenty of different ways to get in contact with us if somebody has a question. And so now moving forward, we have the password taken care of, and we go to the next page, and now we get into what's called the student demographic information. Very straightforward information here, such as name and permanent mailing address. But again, you want to take a moment here, you want to get this right. Very important start to the FAFSA.
Absolutely, and you'll note that the screen is blue, which tells you that you're entering the student's information, and it also is asking and just continuing that student demographic information, whether they're married, some of the other information that the student has to complete, address and different things like that.
And so the family will go through these items, the student's information, get all these items entered, and then we go to student eligibility. And the student eligibility questions are on the next page, and now we talk about, are you a U.S. citizen, and a couple other very straightforward questions, but again, we want to get this right before we get into some of the more financial questions of the FAFSA.
These are all very important to establish a student's eligibility, as Bill mentioned. And also on this screen is a really important question that asks about work-study. It's important if a student thinks that they might be interested in working on their college campus at all to select that option. It doesn't mean that you have to work if you're offered work-study. It just means that you're telling the school you might be interested, and if that is available, they will offer that to you as a part of your aid package.
Now the next slide that we have talks about the name of the high school, and this is if you put in the city of the high school that you attend. Again, this is one of those boxes and forms that will help you get the proper high school, and it will populate, but you want to get it right. And again, it's just sort of a drop-down situation, and it works very well. So you enter the high school that you attend, you get it correct, you click confirm, and we move forward. And on the next slide here, we get into the school selection, and now we're not talking about the high school anymore. Now we're talking about the colleges that you possibly will attend. The importance about this, of course, is only the schools that you give information about or give the right to will get the information. So this is the college selection page.
Right, and a student can choose up to 10 different colleges that they can send their information to. So it's very important that they go in there and they decide which 10 schools. It's not to say if you're working with more than 10 schools still that you can't go back in at a later date when your FAFSA has been processed and add different schools, but you want to pick your top 10 to start with. It's also very important when you're on the screen to make sure that you click the Add button and add the school so it shows up on the list. And you'll see in a slide here in just a moment that will show you an example of what that looks like when you're adding schools.
And of course, when you are picking the schools that you start to type in the name and you get that Add button in the middle, as you'll see a drop down this year, we've had a lot of questions where people had them show up in the list below but then didn't get them in the final column. That Add button in the middle can help the family, can get that name of the list on the left into the right-hand column, and people that are doing the form will see that when they go through it. We have a quick question. We're going to take one of our social media questions, so let's go over to our friends Doug and Synovia at the other table. What do we have?
Yes, so we have a question here. I know you guys mentioned that when students fill out the FAFSA, they have to mention if they are married or not. But this question actually asks, if I'm going to get married this summer, how do I answer the question that asks if I am married?
As of today, not married, but in the summer will be married.
Absolutely. So the student's going to fill out that form and they will fill it out, and based on some questions that we'll get to here in a minute, they may or may not still be a dependent student where they have to put in their parents' information. But once they get married, they can always go in and update that information. It's up to the school to help them and work through that with them and decide if they will accept that change of information at that point.
Great question. And we'll have more questions from Doug and Synovia as we move along. We just picked the schools that we are going to include on the FAFSA up to 10. And now the next slide that we're going to show has an example of what 3 schools, if they were selected, would look like on the FAFSA. This is sort of what you're looking at here. And Heidi, just a thought or two about what people will be viewing here once they've selected certain schools into this page.
You just want to make sure you check that the schools that you want to get your FAFSA information are listed here. And you'll see that there is also a question about housing plans, so you can let the school know what you're thinking of doing as far as living on campus or off campus, staying with your parents, things like that.
And if a school was not in your mind, you were not thinking about them, but you wanted to go back later, again, very important point, you can down the road. All of a sudden a new school shows up in the picture, you can go and add that later. That's not a problem.
Right, absolutely.
Once again, if you have a question for us by email, FAFSA@learnmore.org, FAFSA@learnmore.org. Our Twitter hashtag for the event, hashtag FAFSA Friday. On Facebook, facebook.com/learnmorein. And the phone number, 1-800-992-2076, as you can see on the screen right there. And we are happy to take your questions and cover those as we move along. So we have the schools selected, Heidi, and as we have the schools selected and we have that all taken care of, we now get to a point where we have the dependency determination, very important, and a long list of questions.
Right, this screen is one where students go through an entire list of questions that determine whether they're going to have to put parents' information on the form or not. And so they want to go through, this is questions that ask about their age, their marital status, if they have children they support, and if they answer no to all of these questions, they will need to provide parents' information.
So at this point, we have all no's here on this part of the slides, and because we did that, we wanted to make sure that we were able to show what the parents' information was like. If the answer to one of these was yes, any one of this long list, if the answer was yes, then the situation would be the student would be ruled independent, the parental information isn't needed, but because here on the broadcast we want to make sure we show parents what they can fill out, we answered no to all of those. Right. So we answered no to all of those, and so the parental information will be needed, and if you answer no to every one of those questions, then the next slide you would see after that is the slide we're going to show next, and this is about providing the parental information into the FAFSA. And so at this point it says, based on your dependency status questions, you are considered a dependent student, and you get the two options on this page.
And at this point, the student would need to put in parent information if they're instructed to do so, unless for some extreme reason they're not able to. And if they cannot, then they can check the box that says, I am unable to provide parental information, and then it will instruct them to go ahead and complete the entire form and submit it, but they will have to have a conversation at some point with the college or university where they're going to attend. There is going to be a need for further information provided based on that situation.
And so at this point of the FAFSA, now we're at the point where taxes and tax information is used, a very important part of the FAFSA as we know. And before we get to that, I think we have a question right now from a student.
Hi, my name's Logan Hale. I'm from Monrovia High School, and I have a question. What if my parents haven't filed their taxes yet?
Great question, and one we get all the time.
Right. And it's very important with that question that you think about the filing deadline more importantly than you think about making sure that your taxes are filed. So you want to go ahead and submit the application by the March 10th Indiana state deadline. And if you have to, you can estimate the tax information. You can either use your 2012 tax information, or you can use your 2013 W-2s and estimate that income information. That's definitely more important to get the form in by the deadline than it is to make sure that you have the absolute final data. If you have to estimate the data, that's okay. Just hit that March 10th deadline.
And this point right here, and it was a great question, this point comes up all the time. Families are so nervous that they don't have the taxes filed, they just don't have it done yet. And we don't want that to scare families and have them miss the deadline, not file the FAFSA. I sort of want families to know this happens all the time.
It does. And you do have the option to go back in there and correct your data whenever you need to. And we actually recommend that once your taxes are filed and you know they've been processed by the IRS, you go back in and link your taxes through the IRS data retrieval. And we'll talk about that a little more in detail here in a few slides. But definitely just submit it by the deadline, and then you can always go back and clean up your data and make it accurate.
Anyone nervous about that, you're not alone. So you're in good company on that one. So now the next slide that we're going to show you, we get to the part of the parent demographic information. And this is a very important slide because answering the top question here, the first question correctly, drives whose information is being requested for. And out of all the things that are important on the FAFSA, this is a big one because we want the family to give the right information into the FAFSA, and that's handled sort of right here.
Right. The parents are going to start by answering a question on their marital status, and then that will determine if you have to complete the form using one parent's data or two different parents' data. And basically that is determined according to whether your parents are never married or they're unmarried but they still live together. They're married, they're remarried, in which case you would provide data for the parent you're living with and their spouse, so your step-parent, and you would also answer based on divorced or separated or widowed. And so you can see in some of those situations we're talking about two parents' data, or in the case of divorce or separation or widowed or never married, it's just going to be one parent's information on the FAFSA.
On this page, we also have a couple of important questions that determine aid, such as household size and also how many students are in college at the same time. And this can make a big difference, and getting this correct is important, but this can make a significant difference in the amount of aid.
It can. A family definitely wants to make sure that they look at who they're reporting in their household. Basically, it's always the student and his or her parent or parents, depending on that previous question when you determined whether you needed information for one or two parents. And then you're also going to list that parent's other children if they provide more than half support for those other children, and also anyone else that your parents may be supporting more than 50%. So that could possibly be like an elderly parent, your grandparent, or it could be someone else that your parents have decided to help provide support for.
Now as we move forward, we get to a question just about filing status. This is a straightforward question, but it is very important because what you give here talks about, have the taxes been filed or are they going to be filed? And this goes back to what you were answering a few moments ago about using information from 2012 or looking back a year, and this gets addressed right here. Very straightforward, but an important answer for parent tax information.
Right. Parents can select the option that they will file, and that means they are estimating their taxes. And so if you choose that, if you are going in before you've been able to complete your taxes, you just choose the will file. If you have already filed your taxes, then that's the option you're going to pick. If you are not going to file, meaning that you're not required to file by the IRS, then you can select that as well, but you will need to still provide income information. And there's a question later that will ask income from work, and so the parent would still need to put that in even if they're not required to file a tax return.
In just a moment, we're going to get into the topic of the IRS data retrieval tool, and this can be one of the great things that saves families on time, both filing the FAFSA and then later in a possible verification. It's a great tool and it can help a lot of families. But we have a quick question coming up from another student, and let's go to that right now.
Hi, I'm Rachel Green, a senior at Monrovia High School, and I have a question. If I live with my aunt, uncle, or grandparent, should that relative's income be included on my FAFSA?
And a great question about where the student lives and how that affects the FAFSA. A very common question, and you have an answer.
Right. It really depends on the student's specific situation. They would never want to include information for an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent unless that person has legally adopted the student. Basically, the people who should be filling out the FAFSA are the student's biological parents or the parents as determined by the previous answer based on marital status. If the student lives with another family member, they won't put that family member's information on the FAFSA again unless they've been legally adopted by that person.
Very common question, a very important answer.
Right, absolutely.
Very good. Okay, so we can go to the data retrieval tool. This is something when families are able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, you can just see like a weight being lifted off their shoulders. It is so helpful. This is the page where it gets addressed, and let's just talk about this for a moment.
Basically, you go out here and you answer some simple questions that let you know whether you will be eligible to use the IRS data retrieval tool or not. Those questions are basic as to when you filed your taxes and what type of tax return you filed. And at that point, if the family qualifies, the parents will be able to use the IRS data retrieval tool to pull in their tax information. And in a moment, we're going to show you a couple of pages from the IRS data retrieval tool, and it'll show you that you actually do go right out to the IRS website and you have to type in some basic information. So like your address is very important that you filed your tax return under. And once you get that information, a second step is that you actually have to do an active confirmation to transfer that data back to your FAFSA form. So it's not enough just to go out to the IRS data retrieval site. You have to actually transfer that information back. And typically this is going to be available now if you filed your taxes. It starts in February each year. And if a family files electronically, those taxes are usually available within a couple weeks. Bill says he's had someone do it as quickly as a few days. If you file via a paper return, it could take up to 4 to 6 weeks or so before you'll be able to retrieve your taxes into your FAFSA document.
And one important point I'd just like to throw out there, on the screen that we were showing before where you address the data retrieval tool, if you answer yes to the third question there where it says, have you filed electronically in the last couple weeks? If you, and we're seeing it on the monitor right now, if you answer yes to that third question, there is a phrase there that says, and I can't remember the specific wording right here, but most families hit next and move right on by. And if you click the information there that says you can read some information about the data retrieval tool, you can then get asked what is now showing on the bottom of the screen. And family after family that I was helping was skipping right on by the data retrieval tool because it wasn't being shown because they had answered yes to question 3. because the logic was saying if you haven't filed at least a couple weeks ahead of time, it's not going to be ready. But I can assure you, many times over the last couple weeks, families that had filed just a couple days before, it did work. Now, that's not always going to be the case. It's not always going to be the case, but we don't want families to miss the opportunity to use the data retrieval tool if they have filed electronically. And before we get to the next slides that we want to show you, I believe we have a social media question.
All right.
All right, I have a Twitter question that says, cover savings bonds. My son has e-bonds from grandparents. Is there anything special?
E-bonds from grandparents, and let's talk about that for a moment. So now, okay.
Actually, what I was going to ask Doug is we're going to talk here in a little bit about assets and investments, and we have a great slide that details all of that information.
Great.
So if we can just ask that person to hold tight with us and stay tuned, we'll get to a slide that shows you all that specific information on assets, what you have to include and what you don't. That'll be really helpful for them to see that online.
What a great tease we have here. That was fantastic. We have a little tease, so you have to stay tuned to get the answer, but we will have the answer.
Breaking news, right?
In just a few moments. So finishing up with the IRS data retrieval tool, and Heidi, you talked about this a moment ago. So when you click on link to the IRS, you have those pages from the IRS letting the IRS know, yes, it's me, this is okay, and then also showing what is going to be sent in from the tool. But we have a slide here that gives sort of a visual of the slides that you were talking about, the pages that you were talking about from the IRS data retrieval tool.
Right, these are the actual pages that I mentioned before where you can see the link to the IRS website and can transfer that data back. And you see on the one behind is where you make that active confirmation that you want to transfer your taxes back to your FAFSA.
And so when a family clicks link to the IRS, they fill out that information, they hit submit, and then they see their information right there. There's usually quite a big smile because they realize that that's going to get transferred right into the FAFSA. They hit submit there, the information goes in, and there's a lot of relief sometimes with the family.
Absolutely.
Now moving on to the next page. So now we get into some more parental financial information, and even if you've used the IRS data retrieval tool, you use the tool, even if the information goes in smoothly right into the FAFSA, it's not going to be the complete end of the parental financial information. There are some questions left, and we wanted to show this slide here that there are still some things that have to be addressed.
Right, there could be other types of income sources that aren't reflected on the FAFSA, and so the family will want to read through each of these questions and answer them if they have any type of other supplemental income.
And the helpful hints are always on the far right-hand side of the screen. This slide does a great job of showing those helpful hints, but a lot of times families have the cursor moving around. If they put the cursor in a particular box, they will see the helpful hints for that box, which is very helpful. And also on some of the questions at the bottom of the page that people can see here, clicking one of those boxes, checking one of those boxes expands it for additional information. Sometimes, again, families are nervous to click the box as if it's going to count their answer and take that answer right there. But they can expand that box, look to see if it applies to them, and they're more than welcome to uncheck the box. So now we move on to the next part, and here we get into a couple more questions about parental financial information. Again, we have additional financial information boxes, things such as child support paid, combat pay or special combat pay. Again, a couple boxes that have to be addressed. They don't apply to many families often, but sometimes they do, and they still have to be addressed. Next, we go to untaxed income, and these boxes here are looking for things like child support received, untaxed portions of pensions, things along these lines, and here we're talking about untaxed income.
Right. A very important item, Bill, is the number one on the list, which is payments to tax-deferred pension and retirement savings plans. Often this is something that is overlooked. It is supplied to you on your W-2. In box 12, a family would be able to look and see if a parent had any of that type of untaxed income. And so it's very important, like Bill said, you use that helpful hints area because you can go and click on that and get information, and it tells you exactly where on your W-2 to go and look and what codes have to be input in this answer.
In just a moment, we'll continue on, and of course, we'll have more questions from social media, our friends at the other side of the room, but we want to remind everyone, if you have a question, you're watching, and you have a question, you can email us at FAFSA@learnmore.org, FAFSA@learnmore.org, or you can call us at 1-800-992-2076, 1-800-992-2076. We also have Twitter hashtag, and it's hashtag FAFSA Friday, and all of those avenues are open to you, and you're more than welcome to send in some questions or comments that way. That's fine as well. So now as we continue on with the FAFSA, we get to the assets part of the situation, and these couple questions here, they definitely cause some stress for some families, Heidi. This part, families want to get this right. It's very important, but this definitely causes some people to take a moment, and we would like to be able to help them as much as possible here so this doesn't become something that's very stressful.
At the very top, you'll see that the FAFSA will automatically ask a family if they have assets over a very specific threshold. And if they can answer yes or no at that point, they go ahead and do that. If they're not sure, then they can go ahead and answer the questions below and then always go back and change their answer based on the totals of those amounts. And so they're looking at the total of cash, savings, and checking. They're also looking at investments and real estate, and then they're looking at business and farm income information as well, or business or farm worth. And as I mentioned to the person who sent the question a little bit earlier, we're almost to the answer. In a couple of slides, we'll show you specifically what the items are that you have to count in that investments area.
And so at this point, if you answered yes or answered no, or were trying to figure out how to answer that properly, the balance of cash, savings, and checking accounts, relatively straightforward. But the investments question is next, and if you put the cursor in that box, there is helpful information on the right. As you can see on the slide now being shown, there's a lot of words here, but let's take a moment with this portion because this is a very important question for a lot of families. There are things that are included, but there's also very important things that are not included.
I would go back to the question that was sent in to us. So you'll see in the very top paragraph that bonds are listed in that list. Right now, we're talking specifically about the parents' assets, but in a little bit, we'll switch and look at the students' portion of answering the questions. And so that the question that came in was very specific about bonds that are the student's property. And so those would be listed as an asset in the student's asset information that we'll get to soon. But if the parent had any type of bonds or stocks, they would need to list them in this section right now. It is important to note, though, the things at the bottom that are things that a family would not include. And so you never include the basic first home that you live in. When they talk about real estate, you're only listing additional properties that you own. So if you own second or third homes, homes possibly that you rent out to other individuals, you would list them, but not the home you live in. You also don't report the value of life insurance or retirement plans. Very important for parents to understand this and to not over-represent the amount of assets that they have.
In just a moment, we're going to get to the ever-important final box there, which refers to investment farms as well as business. And we have a very helpful slide about that. But very quickly, let's just take one more moment to share with everybody how they can get questions into us a few different ways. We have the Twitter hashtag, which is hashtag FAFSA Friday, the hashtag FAFSA Friday option there. And just a reminder where you would fill out the FAFSA, that's at FAFSA.gov, FAFSA.gov, that's where you fill out the FAFSA. And the phone number, 1-800-992-2076. Email, very direct, FAFSA@learnmore.org. Okay, so now back to that slide that just won't go away, but it's a very important one. Let's just take a quick moment and let's talk businesses and/or investment farms, the last item there on that assets page.
Right, and Bill, I think if we go ahead a couple of slides, we address that quite directly. when we look at specifically what types of business or farm information must be included. And so a family is only going to include a business if the parents own and control more than 50% and that business has 100 or fewer full-time employees. And they will only list a family farm if they do not live on the farm. So if the farm is the place where the family lives, it is not listed as an asset. So those are a couple of great points to make that further help families understand those very important asset questions.
Okay, now we've finished the parent information, and now we go to the student tax information. Again, the name student will go across the top. The color of the slides will switch back to the student color that we've seen instead of that light purple color for the parents. The great news before we go through a few slides about the student tax information is that the student questions are going to look very familiar to families that have just done the parent questions.
Absolutely. They'll look exactly like the parent section, except that, as you recall, we're back to blue. That tells you we're back to the student. And a family's going to start with, did the student file taxes? Often students do not have enough income that they have to file taxes, and so they may be reporting will not file. But as I mentioned in the parent section, it's very important that if that student did work, however, and earned some income, they will still need to report that income from work in the section where it asks if you had income that you earned from work. They can still go ahead and say will not file on the taxes, but include that income information later in the questions.
We will go to the next slide in a moment where the student has the opportunity to use the IRS data retrieval tool, but I believe we have another question coming in from a student, so let's go to that question right now.
Hi, my name is Mitchell Stacy. I'm a senior at Cloverdale High School, and I have a question. How does a family decide how many members should be counted in the household size?
Fantastic. You touched on this a few moments ago, but this is definitely something worth talking about because it can make a big difference in the financial aid.
Absolutely. So again, it's the student, it's his or her parent or parents, depending on how many parents' information are on the FAFSA form. And then it's the other siblings, the other children of the parent that they're supporting more than half support. And then also anyone else living in the household that the parents are providing more than half support. Maybe it's the parent's parent, an elderly parent, something like that, that you would include that person as well.
Great question. And now we go to the student tax information, the IRS data retrieval tool. Again, the exact same process for the parents, and as a sort of repetition here, that's a good thing. Again, very straightforward questions, but the students, if they have filed their taxes electronically, if they need to, this is where it happens on this slide right here.
Right, they're able to go out and use the same IRS data retrieval that we previewed for you earlier for the parents to use.
And as you can see also, the ability to get the PIN at this point, if you forgot the PIN or want to get the PIN, you have that opportunity here. It happens again and again throughout the FAFSA, and that can be done here as well. Many times students here click link to the IRS, and they're able to use the data retrieval tool just as the parents were a little bit earlier. Now, at that point, the next slide we would go to, more student financial information, and we have the same sort of thing as we had before. Hopefully the IRS data retrieval tool is used, or as Heidi pointed out, sometimes you aren't even going to need to do that if you're not going to file, which is fine. But now we just go to additional student financial information here after that point in the slide that we're looking at now.
And Bill, there's a very important question on this screen that sometimes confuses students because it asks about grants and scholarships that the student received that are reported to the IRS. This is only grant and scholarship income information that you had to put on your tax return that you submitted to the federal government. So you don't have to list here grants and scholarships you received that go towards your tuition or room and board. Typically, this is only if you received more money than your cost of attendance. Sometimes this would be the case if you have a fellowship or something along those lines where you would get additional income, it would have to be reported on your tax return. But if you're just, say, listing your Pell Grant from the federal government or your state grant, you would not list that here because you are not putting that down as income on your tax return.
Okay, so we move on to the next slide. We continue on with the student financial information as we move forward, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a moment, but I believe we can go back over to our social media table, and we have another question.
Okay, so this one says, should students list all scholarships received, as you were just talking about, but including the 21st century scholars on the FAFSA?
Oh, very good, very good. Heidi, do we include the 21st century scholars information on the FAFSA, or do we need a little more clarification on that one?
No, it really goes back to, Bill, exactly what I just said, that they would not include that scholarship information unless it goes over their total cost of attendance. And that is very rare, even with the 21st century scholarship, which is very generous and provides a student at a public institution full tuition. That, though, goes towards tuition, and so they're not over that amount, and it's not reported on their taxes.
Okay. Now in the student financial information section continued, we can go to the untaxed income portion, things like child support received or money received or paid on your behalf. Some of these questions, again, just like with the parent section, if you have a question about one of these, you can click the box on the left. It will expand for some more information. It's not a problem. You can unclick the box. But just sort of wrapping up here, Heidi, anything else on student financial information or any of these catch-all questions that the student has to answer before we sign and submit?
Again, a note there about those payments to tax-deferred pension and savings plans. A little bit rare for students, but you never know. They might be working somewhere that's making those payments to a retirement plan for them. Also, there's a question there that is about money received or paid on your behalf. And often we get asked by students, if my grandmother or my aunt is giving me a place to live, do I have to figure out what that would cost me and put that down? And you truly do not. This is specifically money that they give you. So if they hand you cash or they, maybe are providing some other type of payments for bills, maybe they pay your cell phone bill or something like that, then you would have to put that down. But if they're just giving you a place to live, you don't have to report that information here.
Very helpful. Very helpful. So now we get to the point where we click next after those final student financial information questions. And as we get to this point now, we get to the ever important signing page. We have to agree to the legalese. We have to do the signing, and a very important page, social security number, some legalese, and this is something that has to be addressed. Either you agree and you sign with your PIN or you do not, but this is where it happens now.
Right, basically this is where the student and at least one parent are going to sign all of the information that you read there, which has all of the basic disclaimers and notifies the students that they are saying that all of this information is true and it is to the best of their ability to provide that information, and they use their PIN numbers and sign and submit the FAFSA. So you're almost done. We'll talk in just a minute about what comes next.
And at this point, if you've agreed and you've used your PIN and you've signed, this is a great moment, a lot of relief for families. And if you click Submit Your FAFSA, the next thing that you should see is the confirmation page. And this is very important. We want you to see the confirmation page and have the confirmation number at the top. But this page is not only a great page because it shows that you have submitted the FAFSA, it is also important because there is some data on here that is very helpful to the families as well.
This is going to provide back to the family an estimated family contribution, and it also allows them to see if they qualify for the federal Pell Grant program and some loan eligibility information. When you get to the page that you just saw on the screen, that is truly when you can start the celebration, because you know that your FAFSA has been submitted and it's confirmed that it was sent in to the federal government. This is an important page to print out and keep for your documentation. It doesn't happen very often, but we all know things can happen in cyberspace. And so just in case anything were to happen, you have that confirmation, which includes the date on it, that you submitted your FAFSA by the March 10th State of Indiana deadline.
And if we can go back to that slide one more time very quickly, the top arrow, there are two arrows there, but the top arrow is where if a family, the parent has another student in college at the time, or there's going to be another student in college at that time, that is where the family could click on that box. And this can save a lot of time because the parental information, a lot of that type of basic information as well as the tax information can get sent right in to another FAFSA for the next student, which of course saves a ton of time and reduces errors. So that's the confirmation page, very important page. And now let's talk a little bit about post-FAFSA. You've confirmed, you've filed, you've gotten the confirmation page, and now we're going to have some processing results. So Heidi, the question we've all been waiting for, what happens to the FAFSA after it's been sent in and it's been received? Now all sorts of things start happening, don't they?
Right. Your FAFSA is going to go into the federal government and be processed, and you'll receive back a student aid report. That's going to come back to you electronically if you supplied an email address, or you're going to get a paper copy of your student aid report. This is when you want to look over it and make sure that there aren't any errors, that you didn't mistype any information, and make sure that your data is accurate. Also, all of the schools that you listed on your FAFSA are going to get that information electronically through the student information system, and they will be able to see all of your FAFSA results. This is also a good time to remember the beginning when we talked about the eStudent website for the state of Indiana, because you can go back to that website, or you can go to that website at that point, and you should be able to see your FAFSA results there as well and confirm that the state received everything and double check if you have any edits that you need to address at that point. And then most importantly, this is when you will start to hear from the schools with your actual award letter information. A lot of schools, Bill, in the state of Indiana may not start doing that until close to that March 10th deadline or soon after. So if you're already done with your FAFSA or you're going to do it here in the next few days, don't be alarmed if you don't get that award letter right away. It does take some time for the school to go through your data and prepare that award letter that they're going to send out to you.
We're getting close, but as of today, no need to panic if that hasn't arrived.
Right, absolutely.
Give the schools a little time to work with it. Now, that's all the processing results and all the steps that get taken. The FAFSA is always looking backward a year. So right now in 2014, we're looking back at 2013 information. As we all know, things happen. There are great expenses for medical reasons sometimes. There are divorces. There are job status changes, all sorts of things like that. Well, the FAFSA is sort of looking at the hard numbers, the tax numbers, the data that has occurred. But because there are special circumstances in life, there's a process called special circumstances, and this is something we want families to know about because it can be very important for them.
Right. A family may have paid extreme medical expenses or had some type of unplanned expense. They might also have, unfortunately, had a change in their employment status, or remember earlier when we talked about establishing a student's dependency, if they were a dependent student but still couldn't provide parental information, they had the option of completing the form, and then they would need to talk with the school. This is going to be a conversation that you will need to have school by school that you are looking at attending. It can be something you can do over the phone, or you can go in person to visit their office. For some schools, you might just have to give them notice of it and they will be able to take a look at it. For other things, you might have to supply them additional documentation or even possibly fill out a form that the school has to document that information to them. But definitely don't hesitate to have a conversation with your school if you think you have a special circumstance that hasn't been reflected in the income and asset information you completed on the FAFSA.
In just a moment, we're going to talk about additional application requirements, but I believe our friends Doug and Synovia have another social media question, so let's go to the other table.
So it seems like a lot of circumstances are based off of school-to-school basis. So this question, I'm not sure if it's exactly based off of school. So this question says, if I am currently serving in the National Guard or as a reserve enlistee and am called to active duty, am I considered an independent student for purposes of completing the FAFSA?
Fantastic. Called to active duty, and a very important question, and that term right there, active duty, plays a big role in the answer.
Absolutely. If you remember back when we were reading the list of questions, when the student answered things like their age, their marital status, there was one on there that asked if the student was a veteran or if they were on active duty. And so that is the basic factor that allows the student to be an independent student if they have served in active duty. It's important, though, to pay note to the beginning of that question that talked about the reserves. And if a student is still in the reserves, they are often still a dependent student unless they can answer one of the other questions as an independent student. If they have been called to active duty, though, then they would be an independent student at that point.
Great question, thank you. Okay, additional application requirements. So we discussed special circumstances, but now we really want to make sure that families know that sometimes the FAFSA itself is not the only form that has to be completed. A school may have additional things that they want, and I recommend to families that they should do that if it could lead to some more financial aid, but there can be additional application requirements.
Absolutely. For most of those schools, it is to determine whether a student is eligible for institutional dollars that that college or university is going to be offering. And so for some schools, they may ask you to complete the CSS profile form or possibly their own institutional financial aid application. And as Bill said, if you'd like to take a look and see what that college might be able to offer you in the form of grants and scholarships from their institution, you definitely want to comply with whatever their application requirements are. The FAFSA is always going to be the first document that you need to do, and you need to do that by that March 10th deadline. But if the school has a school-specific form that they also use, while it might take a little more of your time, you definitely want to do that because we have quite a few colleges and universities that have generous scholarship programs that they offer to the students who come to their institutions.
In just a moment, we'll talk about 5 common FAFSA questions. We'll also talk about 5 common FAFSA mistakes. But while we're answering those questions, we want to give out the information one more time where those watching can get in contact with us. FAFSA@learnmore.org, FAFSA@learnmore.org. Also on Twitter, the hashtag FAFSA Friday, hashtag FAFSA Friday. On Facebook, facebook.com/learnmorein. And again, the email FAFSA@learnmore.org. If you have a question, you are more than welcome to send that in. We'll get it answered right away. But right now, let's go on to our next slide, and that is 5 common FAFSA questions. First of all, we start with, I haven't finished my taxes yet. What should I do? A very common question. My taxes aren't done, but can I get this FAFSA thing done? Happens all the time.
And if you recall, Bill, we answered that earlier in the program, that you definitely want to go ahead and get the FAFSA completed by the March 10th deadline, and it's okay if your taxes aren't filed. You'll use estimated information, either that 2012 completed tax return or your 2013 W-2s, and then you estimate. The next question asks about whether you'll have to provide parent information, and if you can't do that, remember we mentioned to you about going ahead and saying that you can't. But why do you have to provide that? Basically, you have to provide parent information if you're deemed to be an a dependent student. Basically, when a college puts together your financial aid, they are looking to both the student and his or her parent for resources to help with paying for college.
And that's why. Now, another common question that we want to make sure people are clear on so they file the FAFSA correctly. My parents are divorced. Which parent do I use on the FAFSA? It's a common question, a very straightforward answer, but if parents are divorced, Heidi, which parent is used on the FAFSA?
Basically, the student's going to put the parent's information where they lived most in 2013. If they can't determine that, then what they would do is put the information for the parent who provided more than half support for them. So it's either where did you live most or who supported you more, and it's that parent's data that needs to be put on the FAFSA.
And just two more 5 common FAFSA questions. What if I am unable to provide my parents' information? And this one's a heartbreaker. This one is we feel very bad about, but it happens. The student is unable, truly unable to provide parents' information, their income information or their signature. This is a big one. It happens a lot. But Heidi, what is the advice for a student that is in this position?
They're going to go ahead and select that question that they can't provide parent information, and then they're going to go ahead and complete the document and submit it, and then they'll want to have a conversation with the college or university that they're looking at attending, because they might have to provide some additional information.
And we have a social media question in just a second, but finally the number 5 question here. Does my retirement plan count as an investment on my FAFSA?
It absolutely does not. Your basic retirement plan is not going to be counted as an asset.
So for once you had good news for everybody.
Absolutely, good
Okay.
news.
Well, we're normally the bad news people. That was great. And on that note, we'll send it over to the other table and our friends Doug and Synovia, who have a social media question.
Question, in terms of how many children are in the household, it says if you support that child at more than 50%, you count them. What about divorced parents who split the support 50-50? Who counts the child in their household?
Great question.
Basically, for that family, they really would need to try to determine if one parent is providing more support than the other. And I would encourage them, if they need to have a conversation with a financial aid professional at the college or university that they're going to attend. Or in a minute, we're going to tell you about a great resource. They could come to College Goal Sunday. Across the state, we'll have a number of individuals who will be able to help families with questions like that. That one sometimes, Doug, can be a little bit personal, and so we may need to talk through that situation with that family one-on-one. But in general, they really would need to try to determine which parent provided more support, if possible.
And that question reminds me of another question that we often get in the case of divorce, where the comment is told to us that the student lives exactly 50-50 between the two parents, and the question comes up which parent should then be used, and it goes to exactly 50-50. And so that comes up a lot as well in the case of which parent should file the FAFSA, the 50-50 designation. So.
Right, and if they can't determine that, then it's the parent who provides more support.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay, now we're going to go to 5 common FAFSA mistakes. 5 common FAFSA mistakes. Number 1, incorrect Social Security number. And this could be a biggie, but incorrect Social Security number.
We talked about this earlier, Bill, and they really want to make sure that they supply the Social Security number right off the Social Security card. That's very important.
And the next is mistaking adjusted gross income for total income. Mistaking adjusted gross income for total income. With this one, the IRS data retrieval tool is a huge help, and also the line numbers in the help boxes, but this is one that is common and it can be a mistake often.
Right, a family wants to make sure they look at the line number on their tax return that is their adjusted gross income and not their total income. So really report just the adjusted gross income. The next one talks about incorrect parent information, and we addressed that just a few moments ago. So when you go back into the document, you'll remember that there was that question the parent answered about marital status, and then it directs you to which parent or parents' information has to be put on the form.
Now we're going to go to a very important 4th common FAFSA mistake, but this one, it actually gets me very bothered. I don't even want to think about number 4. And we'll get to that in just a moment, but we have another student question coming up, so we'll get the question from the student, and then we'll go back to important number 4 here, the student question right here.
Hello, my name is Michaela Moore, and I'm a senior at Cloverdale High School. I have a question. I'm not sure if I'm going to school in the fall, but should I still file the FAFSA?
Great question. Not sure about going to school in the fall. Again, we always encourage, if there is a possibility of going to college, filing the FAFSA, getting that taken care of, because if you file the FAFSA and then you end up not going to college, so be it. But if you do not file the FAFSA and you end up going to college, you can miss out on a lot of aid, and that's something we absolutely do not want to happen. And speaking of something we absolutely do not want to happen, we do not want any family to miss the state deadline. This sort of just makes us even crazy to think about. The March 10th Indiana filing deadline, it is so important, and we just do not want anybody to miss that, but it happens, unfortunately, all the time.
The family really wants to make sure they get that in by the March 10th deadline. It could mean the difference of getting state aid or not getting any at all for this entire school year. And so getting that FAFSA in by March 10th is very important. It also kind of leads into that last bullet there about not filing because you think you make too much money. I tell families that you want to go ahead and fill out the FAFSA at least the very first year and see what you might be eligible for. It is a very complex calculation that all of that data goes into. It's not just based on income. As you saw, we answered a bunch of different questions on household size and number in college, parent information, and so really go out there and do it at least your first year before you make the statement that you may not qualify. I mentioned earlier that a lot of colleges and universities have some of their own institutional dollars that they give away to families, and so while you may not qualify possibly for federal or state grant money, you might still qualify from the school to get their grant money. And then also, if you're looking to borrow from the federal loan programs, either the Stafford Direct Loan Program or the Parent Plus program, you do need to do a FAFSA to be eligible for those as well.
And now we talk about a great resource, and again, we've heard a rumor that even after FAFSA Friday, some families may still have a question, which I can't even imagine, but we've heard a rumor that sometimes people still may have a question, and that is a great resource. College Goal Sunday started right here in Indiana, and obviously something very near and dear to our hearts.
College Goal Sunday was started by the Indiana Student Financial Aid Association many years ago, and it's an excellent event where families can come out and actually sit down and complete their FAFSA. It happens across the state, and you see the website on your screen. You can go to the website and see all of the locations that you will be able to attend and go and have someone help you actually complete and submit your FAFSA. That is at 2 p.m. this coming Sunday, February 23rd, 2014. Lots of financial aid professionals from high schools and colleges and universities, and also lots of other volunteers from important agencies and organizations that support helping families file the FAFSA.
And hopefully you'll be volunteering.
Absolutely. You know I will.
There we have it. Amber, that's what we have.
All right. Well, we've covered a lot today. If you still have questions, feel free to visit us at cashforcollegeindiana.org, and soon you'll be able to view this webinar there as a video. We want to thank everyone for helping us today. Don't forget about College Goal Sunday this Sunday, February 23rd. Thank you to our experts, Bill and Heidi, for sharing their time and expertise. Thank you for your participation, and thank you to Ball State for helping us make this a success. Thank you.